In an era when gods and mortals inhabited the same world, when legends emerged from spilled blood and heroes walked among humans, there arises a story forgotten by ancient chroniclers, eclipsed by more celebrated myths. This is the saga of Chrysaor, the golden sword warrior, twin brother of the legendary Pegasus, whose tragic destiny was sealed in the most brutal moment of Greek mythology. Our journey begins with a crime that would echo through the centuries. In primordial times, Medusa was not the monstrous creature of nightmares. She was a maiden of transcendental beauty, the only mortal among the three Gorgon sisters. While Steno and Uriel were born as immortal and terrifying beings, Medusa possessed a human grace that captivated even the immortals. Her golden hair undulated like wheat fields in the wind, her blue eyes rivaled the sea on serene days, and her beauty was so radiant that the gods themselves would interrupt their celestial activities to contemplate her. It was this fatal beauty that awakened the obsession of Poseidon, lord of the oceans and storms. The powerful god of the seas, known for his volatile nature and uncontrollable desires, fixed his covetous eyes on Medusa and decided she would belong to him. Little did it matter that she served as a dedicated priestess in the sacred temple of Athena, the virgin goddess of wisdom and strategic warfare. Even less did it matter that Medusa had taken vows of chastity in honor of her protective divinity. When the Olympian gods desire something, they simply take it, without considering the consequences for mortals. On a fateful night, when the crescent moon barely illuminated the sacred marble, Poseidon materialized within Athena's temple. Medusa was performing her evening rituals, burning myrrh incense and chanting ancient prayers, when a divine and threatening presence filled the air behind her. Upon turning, she found herself face to face with the god of the seas in all his terrible majesty, eyes that blazed like furious tsunamis, a beard that undulated like foam from raging waves, and his gleaming trident radiating primordial power. Medusa pleaded, begged for mercy, desperately tried to escape. But how could a simple mortal flee from an Olympian divinity? Right there, upon the consecrated ground of Athena's temple, Poseidon brutally violated the young priestess, simultaneously defiling both the maiden and the most sacred sanctuary of his divine rival. The act represented both a cruel demonstration of power and a calculated affront to the goddess of wisdom, with whom Poseidon maintained an ancestral rivalry since their dispute over the patronage of Athens. When Athena discovered the desecration of her sacred temple, her divine fury was absolutely devastating. However, here lies one of the most perverse ironies of Olympian justice. Athena dared not punish Poseidon. How could a younger goddess confront her powerful uncle, one of the three great lords who divided the cosmos after the Titanomachy? Poseidon was Zeus's brother, supreme ruler of Olympus, and lord of a third of all creation. Instead, following the twisted logic of divine patriarchy, Athena directed her incandescent rage against Medusa, the innocent and defenseless victim. The metamorphosis imposed upon Medusa was a spectacle of divine horror. Her silky hair writhed agonizingly, transforming into venomous serpents that hissed incessantly near her ears. Her alabaster skin became rough and scaly, with a grayish-green coloration reminiscent of decomposing corpses. Her delicate nails grew like bronze claws, while sharp fangs sprouted from her previously perfect mouth. But the most diabolical transformation occurred in her eyes. Any living being who looked directly into them would be instantly petrified, condemned to become a cold stone statue for all eternity. Medusa was banished to a rocky and desolate island at the edges of the inhabited world, condemned to perpetual isolation. Pregnant with the children generated by Poseidon's violence, she carried her unborn children for endless months. Due to Athena's curse, the children could not be born naturally. They remained trapped in her womb by supernatural forces, awaiting a traumatic event that would release them into the world. Decades passed until Perseus, the semi-divine hero son of Zeus and the mortal Danae, received an apparently suicidal mission to bring Medusa's head as a wedding dowry for the tyrant king Polydectes of Seriphos. Armed with divine gifts, Hermes' winged sandals that allowed him to fly, Athena's polished shield that functioned as a perfect mirror, an adamantine sword capable of cutting any substance, and Hades' helm that made him invisible, Perseus undertook the journey to the cursed island. The confrontation on the cursed island was brutal and decisive. Using the crystalline reflection in Athena's shield to guide his deadly blade, Perseus decapitated Medusa while she rested in uneasy sleep. But it was precisely at the moment of violent death that the true prodigy manifested. From the crimson blood that flowed abundantly from Medusa's severed neck, two extraordinary beings were born simultaneously: Pegasus, the snow-white winged steed that would rise to the heavens, and Chrysaor, the golden sword warrior, who would remain bound to earth and sea. While Pegasus rose majestically to the skies with his resplendent wings, instantly conquering the admiration of all observers, Chrysaor emerged as a young warrior of imposing stature and magnetic presence. His name, derived from the Greek words chrysos, gold, and aor, sword, perfectly reflected the extraordinary weapon he carried from birth. The sword was not merely forged from common gold, but seemed to contain the very essence of sunlight imprisoned in its blade, radiating brightness even in the deepest darkness, and emanating supernatural heat that warmed the hands of whoever wielded it. Chrysaor inherited from his divine father three extraordinary gifts that distinguished him among all mortals and demigods. The first was his tremendous strength, superior to that of any common man, capable of lifting gigantic boulders and toppling fortified walls with his own hands. The second gift resided in his mystical connection to oceanic currents. This, even without possessing full divinity, he could navigate the most treacherous seas without ever losing his way, with waves opening reverently before his passage, as if recognizing the divine blood that flowed in his veins. The third, and perhaps most significant, was his golden sword, which functioned not merely as a weapon, but as a conductor for elemental power, capable of channeling the force of the oceans. After his traumatic birth, Chrysaor followed an irresistible inner impulse that many attributed to the telepathic call of his divine father. He traveled tirelessly westward, crossing dusty roads and verdant valleys, until reaching a blessed coastal region, bathed by a sea of deep and majestic blue. It was in this place that he encountered Calliope, daughter of the primordial titan Oceanus, and the titaness Tethys, an aquatic nymph whose eyes reflected the wisdom accumulated over immemorial ages. The meeting between Chrysaor and Calliope was predestined by the fates, the weavers of destiny. She instantly recognized the oceanic power that pulsed in his veins, while he perceived the ancestral connection she maintained with the primordial waters that encircled the earth. Their union transcended mortal romance, representing a cosmic alliance between ancient titanic lineages and the new generation of demigods, born from violence and divine transformation. From the sacred marriage between Chrysaor and Calliope was born Geryon, a child who surpassed all expectations, even considering the fantastic standards of Greek mythology. Geryon emerged into the world possessing three complete human bodies,
harmoniously united at the waist, each body endowed with its own head, arms and distinct personality. His physical strength was so colossal that it surpassed even that of his semi-divine father, while his tripled intelligence allowed him to process information and elaborate strategies in ways that no singular being could understand or follow. When Geryon reached maturity, he established his dominion on the enigmatic island of Erythea, located beyond the famous Pillars of Heracles, at the western extremity of the world, then known to the Greeks. On this mythical land, he created a legendary herd of crimson-red cattle, extraordinary animals whose coats reflected the colors of twilight and whose meat possessed almost supernatural properties. The herd represented far more than material wealth. It symbolized the sacred connection between the earthly world and primordial cosmic forces. Geryon governed Erythea with a mixture of severity and justice inherited from both parents. From Chrysaor, he received the sense of honor and military strength. From Chrysaor, he inherited the wisdom to rule with equity. His island became a safe harbor for honest navigators, but a place of terror for pirates and plunderers. Meanwhile, Chrysaor founded his own kingdom on the Iberian coast, choosing a promontory that rose majestically above the sea. What began as a simple camp with wooden palisades gradually transformed into a prosperous city. Merchants came from distant lands to trade precious metals and provisions with sailors who passed along the trade route established by Chrysaor. The warrior king taught his followers the art of metallurgy, guided by visions that the oceanic gods sometimes sent him in dreams. They learned to forge weapons of superior quality and tools that would last generations. At the highest point of his promontory, Chrysaor erected a sanctuary dedicated to Poseidon, where he performed elaborate sacrifices at each solstice. Chrysaor's rituals were events that attracted people from distant regions. Black bulls, the most valued of sacrificial animals, were offered in honor of Poseidon, along with wine, oil, and honey. It is said that Chrysaor's prayers had real power. Rains came in times of drought, storms calmed when they threatened to destroy fishing vessels, and the seas remained navigable even during the most dangerous seasons. For years, both kingdoms prospered in harmony. Father and son maintained regular correspondence, with messengers traveling between the Iberian coast and the island of Erythea. Geryon's red cattle became famous throughout the Mediterranean world, being mentioned in songs and stories told in taverns from Greece to Phoenician cities. But this golden age was destined to end with the arrival of Heracles, the demigod son of Zeus, charged with fulfilling 12 labors, implied son of Zeus, charged with fulfilling 12 labors, imposed by King Eurystheus. The 10th labor consisted of stealing Geryon's famous herd of red cattle, a task that seemed impossible given Erythea's remote location and its guardian's legendary strength. When rumors about Heracles' arrival reached Chrysaor's ears through merchants who frequented the ports, the warrior king felt a terrible premonition. He knew the stories about Zeus's son, his immeasurable strength, his implacable persistence, and especially his tendency to solve problems through violence, without considering the consequences for the innocent. Worried about his only son's fate, Chrysaor immediately departed for Erythea. The journey, which would normally take several weeks, was completed in a few days thanks to favorable winds, that Poseidon's favorable winds, that Poseidon sent to accelerate his vessel. When he arrived at the island, he found Geryon overconfident, dangerously underconfident, dangerously underestimating the approaching threat. The confrontation between father and son revealed a fundamental difference in their personalities.
Geryon, despite his tripled intelligence, had become proud due to years of uninterrupted success. He believed his superior physical strength would suffice to defeat any invader, including the famous Heracles. Chrysaor, with his experience and wisdom acquired through decades of reign, recognized that Heracles was no ordinary opponent. Zeus's son had defeated the Hydra of Lerna, captured the Erymanthian boar, and completed 8 apparently impossible labors. His strength was not merely physical, but also spiritual, fed by the need for redemption after having killed his own family in a moment of madness induced by Hera. The offering of the golden sword represented more than a paternal gift. It was a symbol of divine lineage and ancestral power that flowed through their veins. The sword had been forged at the moment of Chrysaor's birth, imbued with Poseidon's essence and Medusa's transformative suffering. Its blade could cut through any material defense, and its light would confuse any enemy, giving the bearer a crucial advantage in combat. But Geryon, blinded by the arrogance of one who had never experienced defeat, refused the ancestral weapon. For him, his 6 powerful hands were sufficient weapons. He had crushed enemies with bare fists, broken swords against his hardened skin, and defeated entire armies through pure brute force. Why would he need a sword, even if it were magical? With a heavy heart and a growing sense of doom, Chrysaor left Heraclea. He knew with the certainty that only a father can have, that he would never see his son alive again. During the return journey to his kingdom, the winds that had previously favored him now blew against him, as if the ocean itself were trying to delay his return and force him to witness what was to come. The confrontation between Heracles and Geryon occurred on a plain near Heraclea's coast, an open field where the 3-bodied giant's strength could be fully demonstrated. Geryon faced the Greek hero with all his terrible majesty, 3 shields, 3 spears, 3 helms, and 6 powerful arms moving in perfect coordination. But Heracles had learned through his previous labors that brute force was not always sufficient. His experience against the Hydra of Lerna had taught him the value of strategy and specialized weapons. The arrows he used against Geryon had been dipped in the Hydra's poisonous blood, making them weapons of instant death. 3 arrows were enough. Each found its target in one of Geryon's bodies, and the Hydra's venom proved more powerful than any physical force. The 3-headed giant fell on the plain, his screams echoing across the island and reaching Chrysaor's ears through winds that carry bad news faster than any messenger. Devastated by the loss of his only son, Chrysaor left the throne in the hands of his most trusted counselors and undertook a return journey to Heraclea. He found Geryon's lifeless body abandoned among the rocks, as Heracles had already departed with the red cattle, fulfilling the labor that had been assigned to him. The sight of his dead son, heir to a lineage that traced back to the primordial Titans, awakened in Chrysaor a fury that rivaled his divine father's tempests. Consumed by thirst for vengeance, Chrysaor cursed Heracles' name and swore to pursue him to the ends of the earth. Some say he nearly managed to catch up with the Greek hero during his return journey, but Zeus, concerned that the fight between 2 demigods might escalate into a greater divine conflict, personally intervened to prevent the confrontation. When Chrysaor finally returned to his kingdom on the Iberian coast, he discovered that Calliope had been unable to bear the weight of tragedy. The water nymph, who had lived for millennia witnessing the birth and death of civilizations, could not accept her son's premature loss. On a silent night, she walked to the sea and dissolved into the waves, returning to the primordial waters from which she had been born. Without family, and with a heart hardened by pain, Chrysaor reigned in solitude for many years. Becoming increasingly reclusive, he spoke little and only left his palace to visit Poseidon's sanctuary. His subjects saw him pass with the golden sword sheathed, and his countenance somber, a melancholic figure who carried the weight of unimaginable losses. With the passage of seasons, a terrible drought struck the region. The fields cracked under the relentless sun, crops died, and rivers reduced to mere trickles of water. The people implored their rulers' help, but Chrysaor seemed absent, lost in his own pain and memories. It was then that the warrior king made a decision that would define his final legacy. On a clear morning, he took his golden sword and marched in silence to the highest mountain in his domains. There, on the peak that touched the clouds, he knelt and raised the sword toward the sky, closing his eyes for a ritual that few mortals would dare attempt. For 9 days and 9 nights, Chrysaor remained on the mountain without eating or drinking. He only opened his lips to invoke Poseidon and beg mercy for his people. It was a supreme sacrifice, a king offering his own life in exchange for his subjects' salvation. The golden sword, planted in the rocky earth before him, served as a conductor between the mortal world and the divine realm. The people tell that on the 10th day, dark clouds gathered over the summit, and thunder shook the air with a force that made the entire region tremble. An earthquake opened deep fissures through which crystalline springs burst forth. Water flowed through the dried riverbeds and reached the fields, restoring life to the parched earth. Chrysaor, exhausted beyond human endurance, descended from the mountain without saying a word. That same night, in Poseidon's sanctuary, a black bull was offered in honor of the sea god, and the newly sprung waters were blessed in a ceremony that lasted until dawn. After this extraordinary event, accounts of Chrysaor become diffuse and contradictory. Some assert that he departed for unknown places, sailing out to sea in a solitary vessel, following a final call from his divine father. Others affirm that he ventured into the mountains and was lost forever among ancestral forests, seeking a place where he could finally find peace. There are also those who say that Poseidon, moved by his son's final sacrifice, elevated him to the heavens with his own hand, transforming him into a distant constellation that guides lost navigators through the most treacherous seas. This version is especially popular among sailors, who swear to spot on clear nights a star formation that shines with golden light. Whatever the truth about his end, ancient chroniclers left no definitive accounts of Chrysaor's final destiny. What was recorded was the mark of his reign on the Iberian coasts, and the memory of his lineage interrupted with Geryon's death. His just laws continued to be followed for generations. His teachings about metallurgy spread throughout the region, and Poseidon's sanctuary remained a pilgrimage site for those seeking protection during maritime journeys. With the passing of centuries, Chrysaor's presence in Greek myths was reduced to a few lines in the most ancient poems. His golden sword, his bonds with the waters, and his brief encounter with Heracles remained as testimonies of a demigod who was born amid violence and died shrouded in solitude. Without having the fame of other heroes, he lived and acted in a world where gods and humans shared the same soil, weaving stories that connected one to another like threads in a cosmic tapestry.
Unlike his brother Pegasus, who flew high and became a symbol of freedom and poetic inspiration, Chrysaor remained bound to earth and sea, representing the strength that comes from connection to ancestral roots and the responsibility that accompanies true power. His story is a meditation on the nature of revenge, the weight of leadership, and the price that descendants of gods pay for carrying divine blood in mortal veins. Thus concludes the story of Chrysaor the Golden Sword Warrior, a figure who exemplifies both the grandeur and tragedy inherent in Greek myths. In a time when the boundaries between divine and human were fluid, when heroes were born from spilled blood, and kings sacrificed everything for their peoples, Chrysaor lived a life that echoed with the eternal themes of mythology: love, loss, power, responsibility, and the constant search for meaning in a universe governed by forces beyond mortal comprehension. His legend reminds us that not all heroism is rewarded with fame, not all strength is measured in battles won, and not all greatness is remembered by history's chroniclers. Sometimes the true heroes are those who carry their burdens in silence, who sacrifice their own happiness for others' welfare, and who find strength to continue even when everything they loved has been torn from them. In the vastness of the sea he so loved, in the mountains where he found his last purpose, in the stars that perhaps carry his essence, Chrysaor remains as a reminder that true nobility does not come from the divine blood that flows in our veins, but from the choices we make when confronted with adversity, loss, and the supreme responsibility of protecting those who depend on us.